It was such a pleasure to follow Carol Coletta. She really is a preeminent thinker on urban development in the United States, and I've been a big fan of her for years. And one of the things she could have talked a lot about was what different cities are doing. That in this period of time, the last 10, 15 years, cities have tried to create all sorts of strategies to incubate their creative class. Some of these have been efforts to recreate cultural markers or redefine place. Some of these have just been efforts to support the arts. Some of these have been efforts to create new comparative advantages or to identify their comparative advantages, to link it to economic development and land use strategies. We see this everywhere. Miami is using its zoning code to create walkable urbanity, and they're overlaying this with master plans around green space and museum districts. Kansas City has a tax incentive for supporting the development of public art and public space. Baltimore is trying to incorporate fine arts education into K through 12 curriculum. So there's all these efforts here. But I'm joined by four panelists who can really speak to the success of some of these initiatives, who can look across the nation and say what has worked and what hasn't worked.
We're focused on film, music, media, design, visual arts and crafts in performance.
For those of you that don't know, Dumbo is a small area on the Brooklyn waterfront, sort of defined by the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, the BQE, and the East River. It's probably, around 100 acres. And my father and our firm purchased the vast majority of the neighborhood back in 1980, 81. We bought about 2 million feet of old industrial buildings for $12 million. So basically for 20 years, 15 years, the neighborhood sat there and the artists became more and more prevalent in the neighborhood. The artists were certainly there before we were there, but a gentleman who worked for us would there were giant floors in these buildings. The floor plates are roughly 50,000 square feet. And slowly but surely the schmata manufacturing businesses and the back office, record storage from Wall Street firms would go out of business. They wouldn't want to be there. The economy in New York took a big hit. So we couldn't rent 50,000 foot blocks of space to anyone for any price. And an entrepreneurial guy who worked for us, who was actually there before we were, who ran the neighborhood for us, started subdividing these 50,000 foot floors into 1,000 foot studios for artists to work. And some of the other people that were landlords down there let them live there, and that caused lots of long-term problems for them. We were very tough about people not living there. But slowly but surely, we had this very large arts colony that sort of built up and spread throughout the neighborhood of people who, in a sense, and I think it's an interesting conversation, were the next wave of manufacturers in New York, because they weren't all fine artists. They weren't all painters and sculptors. A lot of them were entrepreneurial businesses, cabinet makers. I remember one guy who made super deluxe model train sets for people who, some rich guy wanted to spend $100,000 and have his custom-made model train set. This guy had a work studio over in Dumbo, and there were literally behind every door there was another story just like that. And that really helped transition the neighborhood, and it kept it alive before we could convert some of the space to residential. And it's really today a creative neighborhood across all ranges. And what's happened with the office space is we've created the same module of space, the same 1,000 to 2,000 foot level of spaces. And we really treat them almost like apartments. We're not smart or sophisticated enough to know what people do, to know how much credit they have. So it's very much a plug and play kind of thing. We've pre-wired the whole building, we pre-build their spaces, we don't ask any questions, we sign short-term leases. Some of them leave in the middle of the night and disappear, and we just repaint and re-rent the space. And lots of them have grown and built unbelievable entrepreneurial organizations. And they move every 6 months because they need twice as much space. There's literally one tenant that started with 500 feet, and now has 25,000 feet of space. And it's very much that type of thing.
ArtSpace was created in 1979 by the Minneapolis Arts Commission, which was a wing of the Minneapolis City Council. It served in its original vision as an advocacy organization for artists who were living then in the warehouse district of Minneapolis, which was a bunch of abandoned buildings and certainly didn't enjoy the economic upturn that it is now. And these artists were essentially squatting in buildings that were not zoned residential, but landlords were hungry for the money and artists liked the space, and so it was kind of a natural marriage. What happened, though, and what we see in almost every community since that we've built our projects in, is that these kinds of creative industries follow our artists into our buildings and around the neighborhoods, and the coffee shops, the wine bars, the graphic design firms, the architectural firms, the lawyers. They come and they stay. And what happens is the gentrification piece, which we all know, artists are the fall people for that, even though they create the space. And so in 1986, after seeing the same artists year after year and sometimes multiple times in a year looking for new spaces because they were being evicted out of or gentrified out of the very places they were creating, in 1986 we were spun off of the Minneapolis Arts Commission as a 501c3 property development company to, in fact, solve that problem in our own small way in Minneapolis, with no visions of really going bigger than that. And the key piece about our space, I think, that sets us apart from many other developers is the preservation of affordable space. Because we are a nonprofit organization, we have no desire to sell the building once it becomes higher in value. And I think that that's one thing that cities are recognizing, that there are a lot of developers out there that build artist lofts, but they aren't to remain permanently affordable, and you sometimes don't always have landlords that are in the business of preserving affordable space but are in the business of selling properties and flipping properties, which is all great. This is a capitalist society and those people need to do those things, but it isn't the art-based mission, and so that's what sets us apart. Our buildings also pay taxes, which is another piece that I think communities really like. And so since 1986, now almost these 21, 22 years later, we have 18 projects in 12 states across the United States, about 650 units of affordable artist housing that we own, operate, and manage. And we have a building in Fergus Falls. Our smallest is 10 units, and we just broke ground on our largest project, which is 100 units of affordable live workspace for artists in Santa Cruz, California. And so that kind of encapsulates the birth and vision of ArtSpace and going forward.
As I said, we identified 6 industries that show significant growth. However, we were not able to focus on all 6. So what we've done is we've determined that there's a common thread between all 6 initiatives, and that's the digital media industry, and specifically the games industry. In terms of numbers, locally, there are 2, the game industry contributes over $200 million in the Boston area. Wow. And that's between actually 58 companies, spread across 58 companies.
Most of our residents derive the majority of their income from something other than their art.
Right.
And that's what really ArtSpace is all about, is to help foster that so that they have both an affordable place to live and an affordable place, a working studio to produce their work that hopefully gives them the leg up so that maybe someday they can derive a majority of their income from their art.
Right.
Focused on, small grassroots arts organizations that are making differences in communities. And those are the people that we've tried to cultivate in Dumbo. We have a group called St. Anne's that we give 40,000 feet to. And we have lots of groups, and what we ask in return is that they bring people there, because 10 years ago you couldn't find anyone on the street there. So our deal was always, okay, we're going to give you space. We have more space than we know what to do with. You run your organization, but you have a responsibility to invest, sweat equity in a sense, and do things that are going to bring people here. And we don't care what it is. We don't care if we like it. We don't care if we understand it. But bring people here, put them on the streets, put them in the bar next door that we gave free rent to, have them go buy chocolate at the chocolatier that we gave free rent to, whatever it is, but put people on the streets. And people create energy. They bring their friends. They create security. That's what creates a sense of place.
You focus on doing a comprehensive research. Let your research drive you. It will direct you. You need to understand exactly what it looks like. What does creative economy looks like in DC? We understand that it's film, media, design, whatever in Boston. But what are your local assets?
Thank you to my co-panelists, and thank you all for spending the last 45 minutes with us, and we look forward to this future.